When symbol becomes proof. Occulture, Art, and Conspiracy. Part 4. Michèle Lamy Scarlett Rouge. The Architecture of an Occultural Moral Panic. Black fingers, dark rituals, and ancient bull-headed gods. On the internet, an occult narrative can be built in seconds, while unpacking the actual history and origins behind those claims takes time, patience, and context. Hello and welcome or welcome back to this video series wherein I respond to a YouTube video from the channel Izzy titled The Occult Teachings of Rick Owens. This is part 4 that will be focusing on Owens' partner, artist Michèle Lamy. A disclaimer: this is in no way meant as a pejorative attack on the content creator Izzy. Izzy is of course free to make his content as he pleases, but for me, this was an opportunity to show how differently material can be presented. This series is examining how claims about the occult are constructed, presented, and interpreted, especially when they are offered as historical or religious fact. It is also focused on promoting media literacy and what I call occult literacy and critical thinking. In part 3, I focused on the collaboration between Owens and Lamy with the artist known as Christine, and delved into a discussion around the concepts of transgression and abjection and how they are used in both art and occult practices. As each part of the series builds upon the last, I would urge you to also watch parts 1 through 3 as well to get the complete picture. Okay. Let's go back to the transcript from Izzy's video. We left off in the last video around the 13-minute mark. Also, a note here, I am omitting any text that is outside the scope of this topic, as Izzy sometimes interjects little skits or other commentary that isn't a part of the larger context. However, I will be addressing the claims for this video in a slightly different manner than I have in the previous ones because of a technique that I feel Izzy is implementing known as Gish Gallop. Gish Gallop is when a speaker overwhelms an audience by throwing out a rapid succession of claims that are seemingly related or connected. It leverages the human tendency to seek patterns and cohesion. The strategy relies on the fact that it takes only seconds or minutes to hear the claims, but potentially hours of research to unpack and examine each one. Incidentally, I've recently learned that there is a relatively new internet adage coined in 2013 known as Brandolini's Law. This states that the effort required to refute information or misinformation is vastly greater than the effort needed to produce it. One of the primary ways a Gish Gallop succeeds is by exhausting the person, galloping the person, trying to unpack it, clarify it, or nuance it. And if you've watched the previous 3 videos, you will probably already recognize this. In this series, I am practicing what historians call deep mapping, taking a small portion of the original video and showing the history and context behind it. Okay, here we go. Quote, "And speaking of faces, we are going to get into the face of basically fashion, which is Michèle Lamy. Everybody loves this woman and thinks that she's amazing. She's a witch. She's a massive witch. Her nickname is the High Priestess of Paris. Let's get into it. Now, this is Michèle Lamy, and Michèle Lamy is known as the High Priestess of Paris. Now, one of the most frustrating things I have encountered on the internet is people who deny the fact that Michèle Lamy is a literal witch. And I don't know what it is. There is some sort of brainwashing that people have undergone, because if you understand what the occult is, occult means hidden. That's what the word literally means. And so it is always trying to hide itself. The main thing with the occult, and specifically people who practice, like the more witchcraft, evil, like exerting my will onto reality type of occult magic, is it is always a part of subversion. That's what it's trying to do. So these people are either such fans of her that they've been subverted by her and they don't want her image tainted, or they know that and they're trying to sort of gaslight you. They want you to feel crazy and want you to go crazy because when you look at this, everybody refers to her as the high priestess. Everybody calls her the high priestess. And if you call her a witch straight out, people get mad at you, and it's really bleeping annoying. End quote. So let's pause here and examine the claims. Michèle Lamy is the high priestess of Paris? Yes, when media outlets call her that. It's an epithet, a journalistic nickname, much like calling Elvis the king or Michael Jackson the king of pop. It reflects her role as the matriarch of Rick Owens' fashion house, her status as a legendary cultural host, and her striking Gothic aesthetic. It's not meant to be taken literally or to assume that a fashion nickname is a self-declared religious title for a secret occult purpose. Does the word occult mean hidden? Yes, it does, but it does not mean subversion. Claiming the word occult inherently has a dark agenda is just factually wrong. Medical journals use the word constantly. Doctors test for occult blood or occult fractures when something isn't visible to the naked eye. Astronomers use occultation to describe an eclipse. Taking the basic Latin word occultus and suggesting it automatically implies a sinister, subversive person or thing is simply incorrect and misleading. Back to the transcript, quote, in fact, one of the things that she is most notably famous for is her famous black fingers. And if you look into what black fingers mean, they're called witch fingers. In fact, during the old trials, when they would try to be finding witches, they would mainly look at a couple of things. One of them being if someone had red hair. Another being if they had black on their fingers or they had any weird markings on their fingers to insinuate that they had been messing with things like charcoal or burned remains. They looked at the fingertips, dude. Now, if you really know what the witch trials were about, they were about executing a certain type of person. But that's a different conversation for another time. That's definitely got to get paywalled. But this is one of the things that they would look for with strange markings, strange things on the fingers. They would also look for third nipples. So that's another thing. But I don't know about her fingers, but they look pretty black, dude. And if that's not enough, because I know for some of you it will not be. End quote. So as not to get overwhelmed with the claims, let's stop here and examine. Black fingers and red hair? What does history say? Looking at witch trials, when trying to determine who was a witch, the criteria were a witch's mark or teat, meaning any large growth on the body, such as extra large moles or warts or areas of the body that didn't bleed or respond to pinpricks or had particular markings on it. The hair was shaved off the entire body to examine it for these things. Interestingly, research shows that witches were not expected to have black fingers themselves, but these were sometimes believed to be a sign that a person was cursed by a witch. Red hair was seen in popular folk superstition as being a sign of untrustworthiness, and curiously, in a rare text, it stated that red hair that was cut off could be used to brew poison. But as far as I can determine, this also was not a sign of being a witch. In the case of Michèle Lamy, she has black hair, so this doesn't even apply to her. So the strange markings and so-called third nipples, yes, but red hair and black fingers, not as Izzy is suggesting. His mysterious comment about the trials, quote, executing a certain type of person, end quote, is not something I can speak on, as I don't know what he's referring to and won't make any assumptions on that point. What can be said about Lamy's black fingers? In a 2019 article by Polymoda, Lamy was asked, quote, what about the way you dress, the way you paint your fingers, your golden teeth caps? What does each of these incredible attributes say about you, and did you decide to enrich or underline your look? Lamy replies, This is the real story. I got absolutely seduced by the Berbers, who are an ethnic group indigenous to North Africa, during my first trip there. I was so mesmerized by the tattoos they had on their faces, being very young at the time, 17 or 18 I was. Also, I have this constitutional look, being very tan, so it kind of looks natural on me. The way I looked, even as a child, created some sort of personal evolution, and I would experiment early as well, like with henna, to change the color of my hair, or to tattoo my fingers so that I could look at them. Then I moved to the Japanese vegetable dye because I wanted my nails to be black, but not in a cheap, shiny way. The teeth happened in LA, where I found this artist that was a New Age type who convinced me to put gold on them. This is my personal evolution, though. If boxing could be perceived as barbaric, as my black fingers and tattoos on the face, it is in fact a metaphor for looking at the bigger picture of where we are at in the world and how we can stand up and face what we need to change. Through the use of fashion and art around this subject, I aim to open up a broader dialogue of how we can use our bodies to connect with our emotions and influence our politics for the better." End quote. Another article by Nadia Oalnan in Fizzy Mag from 2025, quote, "The fashion world calls her the high priestess of Rick Owens. Some call her an artist, others a muse. In more superstitious corners, she's allegedly a witch, the kind who can dress you in something that changes your fate. The Amazigh, often called Berbers by outsiders, though they prefer their own name, are the indigenous people of North Africa, stretching from Morocco's Atlas and Rif Mountains to the Sahara's edge. In Nador, in Morocco's Rif region, Amazigh women are keepers of an ancient visual language. They wear silver as protection and currency, henna to mark life's turning points, and tattoos as living amulets. The forehead marking, whether tattooed, painted, or drawn in kohl, is a spiritual seal. Positioned between the eyes, it guards the third eye, the inner sight. It is both a shield and a beacon, calling on ancestral spirits to watch over the wearer. Michèle Lamy's daily forehead line echoes this tradition, a modern personal talisman. Whether you see it as a nod to the Amazigh, an ancestral whisper from her Algerian roots, or the sigil of an alleged witch, it is unmistakably hers. Lamy has absorbed these codes with respect and transformed them through her lens. The fortress-like jewelry of Nador becomes brutalist, oversized rings and cuffs. The geometry of tattoos becomes the architecture of her silhouettes. Her forehead line, drawn daily in dark pigment, is her homage to Amazigh markings, a personal sigil that's part style, part invocation." End quote. Notice the tone of this Fizzy Mag article. It's written in evocative, elevated fashion prose. When a journalist calls Lamy's makeup a talisman or says her clothing changes your fate, any reasonable reader understands this as poetic hyperbole. It's describing the emotional power of art and fashion. This evocative language is not meant to be flattened into literalism. It's creative and metaphoric, and in my opinion, shouldn't be seen as proof of a secret dark agenda. In the 2016 article Tea with Michèle Lamy by Gus Donoghue for Flaunt magazine, the author writes, quote, "My expectations were confuddled from the outset. After reading as widely as I could on Lamy, and having listened to an eccentric variety of personal anecdotes from people that have known or encountered her, she seemed truly mysterious. The video interviews were the most revealing, unmistakable signposts to an agile mind and a broad education. Lamy began her career as a criminal defense attorney in Paris, before becoming a striptease dancer, before moving to Los Angeles and launching her own fashion line, before meeting her husband, the acclaimed fashion designer Rick Owens, before founding and running one of the hippest establishments in the city, the now closed Les Deux Cafés, before moving back to Paris, before producing several of the creative outputs of the Rick Owens brand, like the furniture and homewares collections and the Hunrod jewelry line with Laurie Rodkin, before becoming one of the most unique and iconic figures on the global fashion scene today. Lamy seems, if perhaps not oblivious to, at least uninterested in her status as a fashion icon. But then Lamy is far removed from the manufactured, carefully strategized icons of fashion typical of today. The inspiration for Lamy's idiosyncratic appearance lies far in her past. The first time I went to North Africa and I was 17 or 18, I saw this woman with all these necklaces and tattoos. I found it so marvelous, so beautiful, she tells me, her dusky accent rich with animation. So I'm sure it stays. Just thinking I wanted to look like this, how much I was in awe of this. For a woman who cursory internet searches reveals to be synonymous with words and phrases like dark priestess, witch, gypsy, sorceress, and even 1600 years old, Lamy is remarkably rational. Remarkably because in the world of fashion, adherence to logical and rational beliefs, let alone those which might be described as scientific, is generally the exception rather than the rule. In a video interview last year, she was asked whether she believed in a god. Typically of Lamy, she didn't rush her answer. I don't know what a god is. I believe in DNA. I believe that genes have memory. I believe in civilization. I don't have a religion to put a name on it. Because the more the sciences are finding, the more proud of humanity I am, and thinking that people can behave like incredible human beings without the help of a god. That's what I believe in. I ask Lamy whether she is still as proud of humanity. I'm sure this is still the sentiment that I hold, she tells me, her hands gesturing in a constant ethereal weave. But at the same time, it's extremely depressing because there is all those people who find out so many things, meaning scientists, and they're the ones who change our minds so slowly, and everybody is killing each other for a story of religion or a tribal fight from the 6th century. So it's difficult to put it together, but if you want to look at the positive side, it's so exciting that we discover something about ourselves, from genes to black holes to stars, and I don't understand why it's not the first page of the newspaper all the time." End quote. Taking all of this into account, Lamy does not appear to show someone who is heavily involved in quote-unquote occult practices. While there might be esoteric or occult inspirations or references on the surface, which is all we can really speak to, what's presented to us, I'm not convinced that this woman is truly a witch or ritual magician. The concepts she speaks of just doesn't point to that life perspective, in my opinion. It would appear that her personal philosophy aligns far more with humanistic secularism, naturalism, and scientific wonder than with ritual magic or occult theology. In high fashion, avant-garde art, and performance, creators regularly borrow symbols, shapes, and ritualistic visual languages, whether brutalist architecture, tribal body art, or Gothic surrealism, to evoke emotion and atmosphere. But using dark, mysterious, or ancient imagery as a creative toolkit does not make someone a practicing occultist any more than an actor playing a priest makes them a clergyman. Lamy might have the aura of a mysterious priestess, but this is her chosen fashion style and aesthetic, not a symbol of any occult practices, as far as I can determine. Returning to the transcript now, and I'll just read a large section of this. Quote, in this article done by Family Style and Vogue, Michèle Lamy is sat down with her daughter where, one, she shows all these weird leaping outfits that her and her daughters wear. If you look at the hat that the woman in black has, which is Michèle's daughter, I'm going to make some other connections here in a moment to Marina Abramovich. But we have quotes of them doing a daily ritual that she says is from the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. She literally quotes that, and it is the lesser ritual of the pentagram that she says she does every single day. She says she does magic. She literally says she does it. And if that's not enough, here is her literally in front of a painting in her home, in front of a deity with a bull head, which is known as Baal or Moloch. Now, just to really drive this point home, here is a classic depiction of the deity known as Baal, also known as Moloch. They are the same deity with different names due to translation errors. I've talked about it a million times, but let's get into even more of this just because I feel like I'm taking effing crazy pills when I talk about this. So we have this image. Then we also have this right here. This is a more modern depiction of Baal, sort of from the Renaissance-esque times, I believe. Look at the hat. Look at the little crown on his head. This resembles the crown that I was talking about in Michèle's daughter's hand, the black one with the little things on it. This one right here. Also, there are two children, one for each of them, one with a black heart, one with a red heart, and it's the deity of child sacrifice. Now let's further look at this image. She, Michèle Lamy, is wearing a red dress. This is extremely familiar to the red dress that is being worn here by Marina Abramovich. It might even be the same exact dress. Who knows? Because these are two extremely good friends. They've done various interviews together. They're really good friends. Marina does something called spirit cooking, which is a whole occult ritual that we'll talk about later. We also have Marina wearing this gold hat that is also depicted in images and super classical images of Baal. This right here is a statue as well as a stone etching of the deity known as Baal. And we just saw Marina wearing a gold hat that resembles this almost identically. These two are close friends and they are absolutely into Baal worship. And I'm going to show you an example of this in case all of that doesn't tickle your fancy. End quote. Right. So here again is an example of Gish Gallop. But let's start with the Golden Dawn and the ritual. Around 1886, three men, William Wynne Westcott, Samuel Liddell MacGregor Mathers, and William Robert Woodman, claimed to have acquired an ancient 15th or 16th century Rosicrucian manuscript that they used as legitimate leverage, so to speak, to found their society known as the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn in 1888. This manuscript had been passed down through secret lineages for centuries, it was told, until Westcott conveniently discovered it in a London bookstall or inherited it from Masonic scholar Kenneth Mackenzie around 1886. Known as the cipher manuscripts, this text drew heavily on Kabbalah, the Tree of Life, traditional Jewish prayers, Renaissance magic, and famous occult authors Agrippa and Levi. Using this text as their foundation, Mathers and Moira Bergson Mathers, another core member, synthesized this to create the order's curriculum, including the lesser ritual of the pentagram. Decades later, former member Aleister Crowley published the secret ritual in his journal, The Equinox. Today, it is freely accessible worldwide on the internet. This ritual is not witchcraft, and many people perform it for non-occult or spiritual purposes. It draws on centuries of older Jewish and Western esoteric traditions to create a practical, daily mental hygiene ritual. In very simple terms, the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, or LBRP, is essentially an energetic vacuum cleaner and protective lock on the door of your mind. It is a 5-minute daily practice combining simple body movements, breathing, vocalization, and visualization, designed to clear out bad energies or vibes, calm your nervous system, and build a protective wall of sorts around your headspace. It is like an active meditation that focuses your attention in order to feel grounded, and it can act as a mental and/or emotional reset. Spiritually speaking, it can provide a sense of protection, as practitioners do this before and after any major meditation or rituals. It cleanses the area so no unwanted spiritual static interferes with what they are doing. The ritual employs religious language, using the Hebrew names of God, the pentagram or Solomon's seal as a shield, and calling upon archangels for protection. In essence, the ritual uses Western ceremonial theater to perform a classic Kabbalistic prayer for divine balance and protection. Scarlett Rouge's own reasons for why she performs this ritual can be found in a piece by Studio Oro that recorded Rouge's opening ceremony, where she talks about and performs this ritual to her art exhibition. Reading from this article, Rouge states, quote, "There is a deep root between art and religion. There is a bond between the artifact and the remembered, between the concept and the concrete. And it is this bond, this root, that links matter to spirit. And it is this spirituality that gives the weight to our paintings, our statues, our monuments, our memorials. Many years ago, I felt a longing to connect to this ethereal spirit, but I didn't have the tools. So I looked towards the East, where these practices are more commercial, and I practiced, and many exercises worked. I enjoyed myself. I experienced the 0 point, and yet did not fully find myself. And I realized by looking to other cultures, I was not bogged down by their cult or class warfares, and this was good, yet it left me with a disconnect. Because cults are always informed and born out of their environments, and this is imprinted onto our genes. One day, I heard a wise woman say, 'Look in your own backyard. All the same stories and practices are hidden there.' So I started to look beyond the institutions, and I learned about magic, and stared at the books I bought about it on my bookshelves. And finally, one day, after years of tinkering with the spells of manifestation, I realized the books I was afraid to open were about magical self-realization. The fact of the matter is, in the properties of spirit, if you want to be a fully realized human being instead of just a human doing, to be a warrior of light, you have to practice bringing the light into yourself. You can't just sit there and accept a savior and expect something amazing to happen to you. Even worse, they promise a better life for you after you're dead. Who needs it? What about now? The Bible says we are the shepherds of this land. The song says heaven is a place on earth. You have to make it. Do you know what it's worth? End quote. To me, it sounds as if Scarlett has taken the rhetoric, grammar, and architecture of religion and spirituality and has adopted it to represent her viewpoint that each person must create the world themselves in order to become fully realized as a human being. It's not about the God out there, but the force that each person has within themselves to create their own heaven. She strips away the external theology to repurpose it for psychological self-actualization and human agency. It also sounds as if she's talking about taking responsibility for your own mind, rejecting passive dogma, and recognizing that humans are the ones who have to build their own meaning in the world. From an art history perspective, interest in the spiritual is not unusual. I'm referring here to a book called The Spiritual in Art, Abstract Painting, 1890 to 1985, organized by Maurice Tuchman and Judy Freeman and edited by Edward Weisberger. This is a landmark exhibition catalog published in 1986 by the Los Angeles County Museum of Art that accompanied a groundbreaking, controversial exhibition that fundamentally challenged the dominant formalist narrative of modern art history, and instead argued that the origins and development of abstract art were inextricably linked to spiritual, mystical, and occult ideas. The central argument of the book is that abstract art did not emerge in a vacuum of pure formal experimentation. Rather, pioneering artists turned to abstraction as a means to express spiritual truths, cosmic structures, and unseen realities that could no longer be represented through traditional figurative art. It demonstrates 5 primary underlying themes: cosmic imagery, vibration, synesthesia, duality, and sacred geometry that drew from sources such as Hermeticism, alchemy and Kabbalah, theosophy and anthroposophy, Eastern philosophies, and mystical science. The book features artists such as Kandinsky, Mondrian, Klee, af Klint, Rothko, and Pollock, just to mention a few. Before this exhibition and catalog, mainstream art history often brushed aside or minimized artists' involvement in spiritualism or the occult, treating it as an embarrassing eccentricity or personal quirk. However, note that nowhere in those hundreds of pages of research, artist journals, or library inventories will you find allegations that these abstract painters were devil worshippers or witches. Scholars, curators, and the artists themselves are very clear. They used esoteric ideas, sacred geometry, and spiritual philosophy as creative tools to express human emotion, cosmic order, and psychological truths that literal painting couldn't capture. Back to Scarlett Rouge, she mentions being inspired by Hilma af Klint and Alejandro Jodorowsky's film The Holy Mountain, so she's obviously influenced by the spiritual in art, and said in the Family Style article, quote, "When I step into my studio, I perform my version of the lesser ritual of the pentagram from the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. It is a ceremony that helps me clear the space of noise so I can hear the soul's voice." End quote. Notice her phrasing, my version. When you look at her work through the lens of the spiritual in art, it becomes more likely that Scarlett Rouge isn't practicing magic, but may simply be continuing a long, rich history of artists using symbolic ritual as an engine for creative focus. But even if I'm wrong, even if she is a literal ceremonial magician or esotericist, let's be very clear. There is nothing inherently evil about that. As I stated at the start of this video, I'm presenting alternative viewpoints and looking at context and history as well to help form a more nuanced picture. Okay, let's move on to the Baal-Moloch confusion, or perhaps conflation, with the figure of the Minotaur. This is fairly straightforward. Whenever internet commentators talk about Baal or Moloch, they almost always conjure the exact same image, a giant bull-headed monster demanding sacrifices. Historically, here is how 3 completely different things got smashed into one pop culture trope. First, Baal. In ancient Canaanite religion, Baal was a storm god associated with fertility and strength, and his symbol was a young bull or ram. Second, Moloch, or Moloch. In original Phoenician contexts, the word Moloch wasn't even the name of a god. It was a technical term for a specific type of offering or sacrifice. Over time, biblical writers personified the word into a foreign deity known as Moloch or Melech. So, where does the bull-headed monster come from? Greek and Roman historians, writing centuries later, blended the stories of Carthaginian sacrifices with their own famous myth, the Minotaur of Crete, a literal bull man, along with legends of the brazen bull of Phalaris. By the Middle Ages, commentators combined all of this into a single fictional blueprint, a hollow bronze statue with a bull's head and human hands heated by fire. So when commentators claim there is an ancient deity with the head of a bull named Moloch or Baal, they are repeating a 12th century medieval mashup of Greek mythology and biblical mistranslation. If you've been watching this series so far, you've probably noticed this pattern of misinterpretation and conflation. I will include scholarly references for your further reading, but this is the gist of it. Scarlett Rouge painted the mural of the Minotaur and said this about it, quote, "It was the middle of the night when I first received an email from Rick asking me to paint it. His only prompt was that it should be like Pablo Picasso's Guernica. Edit, this is his famous anti-war painting. Back to the quote. On one level, it is about our family. Rick, the dominating bull, and Michèle screaming, as always, where's my phone? It was a secret surprise for Michèle, and I only had 10 days to complete the project. In truth, he had asked me to do it as a kind of revenge because she had bought an expensive artwork he didn't like. I thought it would be painted over after a few years, but it remains, and the house would feel naked without it." End quote. When Scarlett Rouge painted a bull on the wall of Michèle Lamy's home, Izzy immediately identified it as the Canaanite storm god Baal to fit his narrative of a secret sacrificial cult. But as I've tried to show, the figure with a bull's head is most likely the Minotaur, a staple of Greek mythology and avant-garde surrealism, especially given the reference to Picasso and his much-discussed fixation on the figure of the Minotaur. The swap to Baal in this context seems to be for convenience to keep with the conspiracy narrative. As the discussion of Picasso's interest in the Minotaur is outside the scope of this video, I'll provide links to some sources for those who are curious to learn more about that. Also, a note here, I am leaving the discussion of Marina Abramovich to a later video, as this ties back into the last part of the video transcript and is better suited to be discussed in more detail then. But put a pin in the transcript comments about children, as that's coming up a bit later on. So let's go back to the video transcript. Quote, "So what you're going to see next is going to blow your mind, because guess what? I called this 2 years ago. 2 years ago. So this first video is from a fashion show that Rick had outside. Now what happened was it began to rain, and during the storm, Michèle Lamy offered a small offering to the quote-unquote rain gods to make the rain go away. Now, the interesting thing about this is Baal is known as the god of storms, and rain as well as fertility." Okay, Stephanie here. This part of the transcript is the text from a TikTok or Instagram video taken by someone at one of Rick Owens' fashion shows in Paris, and Cardi B is featured. You hear various people speaking. Going back to the transcript, quote, "Is that an offering for the rain god? I'm pretty sure. Yeah, because they're over here too. Yeah. Oh, and look how beautiful is the sky. Cardi B speaking. It was raining like crazy. Michelle used her superpower to clean. Now the sun is beaming. How lucky you guys got. Like a rain stop. Sunshine. Back to Izzy. One super interesting thing about her being able to clear the rain while offering a little burnt offering to Baal is another individual who was notorious for being able to clear up rainstorms is Jerry Garcia from the Grateful Dead. We also have reports of Elvis doing the same thing. A lot of these individuals are magi. They're magicians. They do magic. They are occultists who practice magic. If you want to learn about that, it's all on the Patreon. You can go check it out. End quote. To be clear, Lamy never claimed to control the weather as far as I can ascertain. This video is showing fashion spectators making a joke about the sun coming out, and that was repackaged as proof of weather magic. Right, so in this section, Izzy is attempting to conflate a coincidence at a fashion show that people were obviously joking about, in my opinion, with folklore surrounding Jerry Garcia of the Grateful Dead and the esoteric interests of Elvis. First, Jerry Garcia and the lore that the Grateful Dead could control the weather. This belief appears to have grown organically among Deadheads during the band's touring years. Outdoor Grateful Dead concerts were often accompanied by memorable weather events, thunderstorms, rain stopping just at the right moment, dramatic sunsets, double rainbows, and so on. Combined with the band's improvisational, almost ritualistic performances, many fans began joking or even half believing that the band influenced the weather. Garcia himself never endorsed the idea. His explanation, calling it a synchronicity instead, is revealing. Rather than dismissing fans' experience outright, he suggests that meaningful coincidence can feel profound without requiring a paranormal explanation. Elvis, on the other hand, did have a genuine interest in esotericism. His mother claimed to have paranormal gifts, and under the influence of his hairdresser and spiritual advisor, Larry Geller, Elvis amassed a massive library of books on theosophy, Gnosticism, Kabbalah, numerology, and Kriya Yoga. He reportedly believed he possessed healing energy in his hands as well. Books like Miguel Connor's The Occult Elvis explore how his inner circle and fans viewed him as a modern American mystic or magician figure. However, this information really has nothing to do with Lamy. But it is an example of how rhetoric is used. So let's examine what's going on here. Concert lore is interpreted literally and reframed as a serious claim of weather manipulation. Saying things like Michèle Lamy can stop the rain, Jerry Garcia could stop the rain, and Elvis is a magician too. This creates the illusion of a connected pattern. It makes it sound like there's an elite hidden club of weather-controlling mystics and attempts to add legitimacy to the claims. But when examined closely, what appears to be happening here is the creation of a relationship where there is none. Back to the transcript, quote, "Now, this next video is interesting because we actually get a complete omission." Sorry, have to interject here again. I think he means admission. So I will say admission instead of omission. Back to the transcript. Quote from Michèle Lamy, where she says, "God is Baal." Now, here's the thing, dude. I have been saying this for literally years. I came out 2 years ago with a video stating all of this. I called every single part of this. I called it. I said that she was into Baal worship. She was into Moloch worship. That these people were essentially Baal worshipers. They were essentially Molochians. That's what they are. And then she gets asked by a streamer to say God is good. And she literally says, God is Baal. Watch this here. Okay, Stephanie jumping in here again. What follows in this section is the transcripts of other video clips that Izzy shows with people approaching Lamy at a public event, asking her to say God is good. It's noisy at this event. There's music playing, and Lamy has a very strong accent when she speaks English. So there's an interaction. They ask her to say these things. Lamy mutters something and walks away, but her speech is muffled. The people in this video, as well as Izzy, are convinced that Lamy said God is Baal and not God is good or something else altogether. In my opinion, this is simply an example of audio pareidolia, the psychological phenomenon where the brain interprets vague audio signals as recognizable words based on expectation, and it's not worth more examination. So let's just jump ahead to when Izzy starts talking again. Quote, the kid can't even get the video right. He's like, oh, she's saying Christ is gay. He's saying Christ is gay. And then he says God's Balenciaga because they're all wearing Dude, it's a cult. It's a 6,000-year-old fertility cult. What don't you understand? They literally sacrifice children to get worldly favors on this realm. It's interesting how A$AP Rocky was doing pretty good, and then as soon as A$AP Yam dies, when he starts hanging out with Michèle Lamy, all of a sudden his career skyrockets even more. These people are literally worshippers of a deity that will give you favors if you sacrifice individuals to them. But if you want more information on it, you can go here and watch the full breakdown on Michèle Lamy. We're going to get into more of it, though. Don't worry. We're going to get into more here on YouTube. So we have her discussing doing pentagram rituals. We have her doing rituals at fashion shows in front of hundreds of people where the homosexuals filming say, oh my God, she did it to the rain gods. She did it to the rain gods. Then we also have the other two little boys who are like, she the Bisiaga. She did it to the Bisi. We have an admission. They worship Baal. End quote. Okay. We have here the common conspiracy trope about musicians selling their soul to a devil or a demon. This is a very long-running narrative that probably every musician has to deal with at one time or another. I've found in my own research for this video that Lamy seems to be a very popular figure within this area, given her own quote-unquote status, so to speak, and it's basically guilt by association. There's not much more that can be said about this tactic. It's an accusation with no proof given, but the point of a Gish Gallop isn't to present a coherent evidence-based argument. It's to pile assertion upon assertion so fast that the viewer feels overwhelmed, mistaking the sheer quantity of outrage for truth. What I find very concerning, though, is the 6,000-year-old fertility cult sacrificing children claims, as this is rooted in racist thought. The core architecture of this narrative, that a secret, powerful elite is secretly torturing or sacrificing victims in hidden, blasphemous rituals, is a direct adaptation of the blood libel, an anti-Semitic trope that originated in medieval Europe in the 12th century. It is the accusation that Jews ritually sacrificed Christian children at Passover to obtain blood for unleavened bread. Throughout history, whenever a culture felt threatened or experienced rapid social change, this basic narrative structure was dusted off and reapplied to new target groups, from early Christians in the Roman Empire to Jews in medieval Europe to women accused of witchcraft in the 16th and 17th centuries. The specific accusation of Baal worship or Moloch sacrifice was popularized in the 19th century. During the anti-Masonic movement in North America and Europe, sensationalist writers accused secret societies of holding clandestine rites dedicated to ancient Canaanite and Babylonian deities like Baal, Baphomet, and Moloch. In the 1890s, a French journalist named Léo Taxil invented an elaborate, fraudulent series of books claiming Freemasons were high-level Satanists who worshipped Baal in secret, underground chambers. Though Taxil eventually confessed it was a complete hoax, his descriptions of rituals, bloody altars, and secret high priestesses laid the literal script for modern occult conspiracies. Another book, The Morning of the Magicians by Louis Pauwels and Jacques Bergier, published in 1960, played a foundational bridge-building role in the mainstreaming and evolution of modern conspiracy culture. Academic historians of esotericism, such as Nicholas Goodrick Clark and Stéphane François, credit The Morning of the Magicians with sparking the modern genre of crypto-history and popularizing the mythology of the occulted elite. Pauwels and Bergier coined the term fantastic realism. Their thesis was that beneath visible recorded history lies an invisible parallel history driven by secret societies, alchemy, extraterrestrial interventions, and hidden esoteric knowledge. This book taught readers to treat conventional history as a superficial cover-up. It introduced a reading strategy where a reader looks at mundane events, modern science, or high art and searches for the quote-unquote real, hidden, esoteric narrative beneath the surface. The entire middle section of the book is dedicated to connecting Nazism, secret societies like the Vril and Tula societies, and black magic. While historians note that Pauwels and Bergier relied on heavily sensationalized or even fabricated claims, the book became a massive international bestseller. It embedded the idea in mainstream pop culture that geopolitical power and dark esoteric rituals are intrinsically linked. Modern theories alleging that political elites, Hollywood figures, or artists engage in secret Baal worship or dark rites inherit their basic dramatic structure directly from this post-war Nazi occultism trope. By mixing genuine scientific interest, esoteric mysticism, and hidden political cabals into a single narrative, Pauwels and Bergier created an early prototype for conspirituality, the hybrid space where New Age wellness, esoteric art, and dark conspiracy panics meet. There's so much more that can be said about this book. If you're interested in a separate video on this, please let me know in the comments. Morning of the Magicians set the scene for what later became known as the Satanic Panic of the 1980s and 90s that is still present today in groups such as QAnon. During this era, evangelical groups, tabloids, and daytime talk shows claimed that an underground network of satanic ritual abusers was performing sacrifices across the United States. The Satanic Panic established the idea that subliminal satanic symbols were hidden in plain sight in heavy metal music, Dungeons and Dragons games, or other role-playing games, and modern art. With art in particular, from the 1930s onwards, the suspicion of avant-garde art specifically relies on an old anti-modernist trope. Whenever artists break away from traditional representation using blood, nonlinear movement, or bodily fluids, it triggers a moral panic among conservative or literalist observers. In the 1930s, the Nazi regime labeled abstract, performance, and expressionist art as degenerate art, claiming it was proof of moral decay and hidden subversion. Throughout the late 20th century, contemporary art using abject themes was routinely attacked by moral crusaders as demonic or blasphemous. This is still present today, as I discussed with the example of the butt muscle song and video. Now, with regard to fashion and how the fashion house Balenciaga came to be involved in these quote-unquote child sacrifice claims, we must look to the most current iteration of conspiracy with QAnon. When this internet network emerged on 4chan in October 2017, it acted as a giant aggregator or mega conspiracy that swallowed all of these older tropes and fused them together. In late 2022, Balenciaga released two separate disastrous ad campaigns that ignited a massive public backlash. One was the gift shop campaign featuring young children holding plush teddy bear bags dressed in bondage-style harnesses and leather accessories. The second was the Spring 2023 campaign that featured an image of a desk with a printed page laying on it, which eagle-eyed viewers discovered was a page from a 2008 Supreme Court ruling on child pornography laws. United States versus Williams. It was an undeniable, catastrophic failure of corporate oversight and creative direction, and the brand rightfully faced intense public condemnation, pulled the ads, and issued public apologies. Because the scandal involved children and poor judgment, conspiracy commentators took the real-world outrage and attached it to fake linguistics, claiming Balenciaga sounds like Baal, and that the brand's very name is an ancient homage to Baal. It's simply the last name of the designer. But this real-world public relations disaster was used as an example of proof of their narrative. However, a deeply tone-deaf, edgy fashion campaign is not evidence of a secret ancient child sacrifice cult. Just as Powell and Berger connected alchemy, nuclear physics, and secret societies into one grand narrative, modern conspiracists connect a performance art show, a clothing line, and an ancient Canaanite deity into a single thread. What we see when we unpack these claims line by line isn't just a collection of simple mistakes about fashion, makeup, or ancient history. It is a demonstration of how easily complex, nuanced art and personal expression can be flattened into a singular, fearful narrative. By stripping away the artistic lineage, whether it's modern homage to Amazigh culture, Picasso's Minotaurs, or century-old modern art traditions, the commentator isn't discovering a secret. He is constructing one. A Gish Gallop succeeds not because its assertions are true, but because it relies on panic and pattern recognition faster than context can keep up. But when we slow down, look at the sources, and apply basic media literacy, as well as occult literacy, the grand conspiracy dissolves into a mixture of artistic exaggeration, aesthetic choices, and recycled historical tropes. In part 5, I will be looking at the claims about Michèle Lamy and Marina Abramović more closely, as these include references to the performance art of both women. I'll also be diving more into the QAnon links to this as well, as this is also relevant for the next section to come that circles back to Rick Owens too. If you are still here now, then you have my deep appreciation for your attention. This video will be released as members first content for Patreons and YouTube members. If you're keen to have early access to the new content, consider joining or subscribing to the channel for free. If you like this kind of content, please give it a thumbs up and even a share. Your support in this way really helps my channel. Until next time, thanks for watching.